Ever since you brought up the noise in my place, there's been so many loud motorcycles going by.
I can hear them even coming through the Discord audio.
There was one of them that was just like hanging right outside my apartment for like 10 minutes doing like "Rrr, rrr."
Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Dr. Kimberly Plump. I am a bioarchaeologist. I study the human skeleton, health and disease, and evolution.
And I'm Dr. Ross Barnett, a paleogeneticist interested in Ice Age megafauna.
And today we are reviewing a movie called Ironmaster from 1983. I know from feedback from listeners that they like it when we do big name blockbuster movies, even if they're not specifically related to the Stone Age, because everybody can relate to those better. But I really like finding these weird, obscure movies that nobody's going to listen to. And this is one of those movies. Had you guys ever heard of this movie before?
Nope.
No, but it was probably the most relevant movie we've watched in a long time.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of big Hollywood movies, and that's probably why our listen numbers are up a little bit, which is probably something we should listen to. But I felt like it was time to do something a little weird. I don't remember where I found this movie, but I found it. It's up entirely on YouTube, so you can go watch this movie if you want to, which I do recommend, even though I don't know that this is a very good movie. So who wants to summarize this movie?
I can, but...
yeah.
Oh, you want to, Ross?
No, I'm happy for that.
I'll just say that I don't know what you guys watched, but at the end of my YouTube thing, I lost the sound. Did you guys lose the sound?
Oh, I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
I had terrible dubbing all the way throughout.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had terrible dubbing, and then the sound just left, so then it was just from context. I got it.
The dialogue is not very important in this movie.
Yeah, I still got it. I was like, I don't think I'm missing anything. So there is a Stone Age human tribe, and they are hunting, and they just have, wood and rock weapons. And I kind of missed why this guy, so there's this guy they all have beautiful hair, but the guy with the short, beautiful hair kills one of the elders. But I missed why he killed him. It was just, he was angry at him.
He's his dad. He's the kind of current leader of the tribe. And the guy with short, beautiful hair is his son, but he's too impetuous. He's too emotional.
Yeah.
And his dad doesn't really want him to lead the tribe after he's retired. He wants the guy with beautiful blonde hair to take over the tribe rather than his own son. And that's why he has to get killed.
Okay. Yeah, see, I knew all that, but then I thought that there might have been a fight that started that I missed. But okay, so it was just like a Lion King type thing? Or what is it? Macbeth? Hamlet? I don't know. Where you kill the father. So he kills them, and the guy with the beautiful blonde hair sees it, so he's a witness to it. And so he tells the tribe members, he can't be leader because he's a murderer, he killed the elder. And so this dark hair guy gets banished from the tribe, and he goes to the volcano, which is called the fire mountain, and it's erupting, and there's magma falling everywhere, and the earth is shaking, and they see it as something to do with their deity, right? Communicating something to that. And so when that's finally finished, and he for some reason goes up to the magma, and at a very specific spot in the magma, or the cooled down magma, he starts to dig, and then he picks up this iron rod that's shaped like a sword, kind of, right? And then he realizes this is really strong. He uses it to break a rock. He realizes now he's got a really good weapon that they don't have, that the other tribe members don't have. And he goes back, and he takes over the
you're
tribe.
missing that a woman mysteriously shows up.
Oh, right, yes. So
right at that point.
This woman with dark hair mysteriously shows up, and she says, "The deity told me that you were here, that you got a weapon at the fire mountain, and so now I'm yours, and you have to go rule the world." And so he's like, yes, that is what has to happen. So then they go back to the tribe. He kills people that refuse to follow him, and then essentially just becomes a power hungry psychopath. And she's his power hungry psychopath's lover. And so he decides that it's not just enough to have that one tribe. He wants to have all the tribes, like he wants to rule all the men. So he kills anybody that fights him, and then so everybody else thinks that he's the ruler, like the deity has chosen him to be this ruler because he has iron. So he teaches them how to make iron weapons, and then they keep going to different tribes or different villages and doing the same thing, killing people who refuse to follow them, and kind of enslaving those who did. So it's not even like he's saying, okay, well, I'm going to rule you, but you can do what you're doing. Like, it's not like he's Alexander the Great or something that lets them live their lives, but he's the ruler. He's more, he's actually really terrible and really bad at being a leader. So he says, like, all of your hunting will come to me. Everything you do will come to me. Like, nothing. What's it?
Everything you hunt is
Everything.
mine.
Yeah,
And then
everything you hunt is
he
mine.
kills all the men and then says, everything you hunt is mine. Like, I'm not sure that this is going to be a very economically efficient dynasty here.
It isn't. And he says everything that you have belongs to me, even you, like even your body and your soul. Anyway, so now he has all these people following him, like doing his bidding, and he keeps going. And the blonde-haired man has left the tribe, so he the dark-haired man said, I'm not going to kill you right away. What I'm going to do is tie you up on sticks outside for like 6 days, and if you survive that without food or water or weapons, then he didn't really say what was going to happen if he survived it, but I guess then he'd kill him. So he's tied up, and then what I think is Australopithecines come, and then he's so scared of the Australopithecines that he rips out his bondage, and he's able to escape the being tied up, and he kills the Australopithecines using wood, and then like a wood branch. And then he runs away, and then he finds a beautiful blonde woman who helps him with his wounds. And she takes him to her tribe, which is a peace-loving tribe that doesn't have any weapons, introduces him to her dad. The dad doesn't want to fight this other guy. He doesn't want to make weapons. He doesn't want to prepare his village for war because they're peace-loving people. They don't believe in weapons. When the bad guy comes, he obviously takes over the village very easily because they don't have any weapons. And they enslave the woman, the blonde-haired woman, and all of her people. The blonde-haired man and the father get away. Then they have to change paths. So the dad says, I'm going to leave because I don't want war. So he's just going to walk away from his village and his daughter and everything. And the blonde-haired man's like, okay, well, you have to go, but I'm going to stay and fight. We're going to make weapons. And so the father leaves, and within like 30 seconds is murdered by the bad guys because he was just walked right back into the village, it looked like, right? Instead of away. So he's killed. And then the blonde-haired man and the couple of people that were like with him that survived go and are able to kind of ambush a couple of the guys that have iron weapons. So then they steal the iron weapons. So then they also have iron weapons. And then they're able to just kind of fight and fight and fight so they get more weapons, and so they're getting almost equally weaponized with the bad guys. And then I lose sound. So then I think what happens is that some of the bad guys come and they're about to kill the blonde woman, but then the other guy says, no, don't kill her. And then they talk it out, like they're able to just talk it out, but I don't know what was said, but I'm guessing what was said what I think should have been said is, why are you following this psychopath? Like, we can just get rid of him and we can all just keep what we hunt and be normal, right? And so then they join him, and then there's eventually this big show off between the bad guys and the good guys with all these iron weapons. The fight goes on for way too long, especially without any sound. It's just really boring. The good guys also had figured out how to make projectiles, so they make like arrows with the iron, so not just swords. So they're able to use projectiles, so they're able to shoot arrows from far away, not just hit you with a sword when you get up close. But they were not hitting the people; they were just hitting close to them. And I don't think that was just that they're bad at aiming. I think they're saying, I don't want to kill you, but I could, right? Like, our weapon is superior, so you just should stop now. And then the blonde woman shoots an arrow and kills the bad woman. And then that really pisses off the bad man, who then he goes crazy. And then there's a showdown between the bad man and the good man. And then eventually the good man wins. And then they throw all of the iron things into the water because they think, okay, we don't want any more iron things. It's obviously corrupt, like it corrupts you. And it's too much power for any human to hold, even though you could just do a lot with iron that's not weapons. And then that's the end.
Yep, that's pretty much it. You missed out like one of the unsexiest sex scenes that I've had the pleasure of watching.
Oh, that got interrupted.
Oh, yeah. You missed out all the lions that randomly turn up.
Well, I was leaving that for you.
Okay, thank you. These the good guys and bad guys, they have names, Kim. I mean, they're not just pieces of meat.
I couldn't really hear the names. I couldn't really hear them. It was like, I know that one of the women was Isa, right?
Yeah, the good guy with the blonde metal hair is Ayla. And the bad guy with the short, dark hair is Vood. And I didn't even get what the bad brunette woman is, what her name was.
Her name is Lith.
Okay. Liz. She's just the bad bitch in my notes.
To be fair, almost all of these characters are just pieces of meat, though. That True. Is, I think, the point of the movie.
Yeah. I thought Ayla reminded me of, I think he looks quite a lot like Kevin Sorbo, the Jerkules, who now is like in lots of crappy Christian movies. I thought he had the same kind of look and the same kind of physique.
He looks like, Kim might get this, Ross probably won't get this. He looks exactly like this doll that my sister had, which was a Barbie doll style, the prince from The Beauty and the Beast, the Disney movie.
Yes. Yeah.
He looks very plastic. I don't know if we've mentioned this yet. He is ripped. His chest is waxed and oiled at all gleaming. Times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sunburnt. I guess because he was out on that.
His chest is so red.
I know.
And something about his face, it has to be plastic surgery. It has to be a ton of plastic surgery. Did any of you look into this guy? Maybe this is where we can start this. Because we start with nitpicking usually, but this movie doesn't care about reality whatsoever.
No, it doesn't.
Did anybody look into this guy?
No.
I had to look into him because on IMDb, his name is Sam Pascoe, but he's the star of the movie and he doesn't even have a photo on IMDb. This is the only movie he's ever been in, according to IMDb. And when you Google him, not a lot comes up except for a Medium article called "Who is Sam Pascoe and Why is Nobody Talking About Him?"
Oh, wow. That sounds like a good article.
It's a pretty good article.
So who is he and why is no one talking about him?
Well, nobody's talking about him because he died in 1985, 2 years after this movie.
Oh.
He, as you can tell, is a bodybuilder and a model, and that's some of the things that he did before this movie. And he did some other films that don't show up on IMDb under various other names, including most commonly Big Macs.
Oh, dear. I think I know where that's going.
And so he was... Now, okay, so we should say this movie is a joint production between Italy and France, and so most of the characters are French or Italian, which probably has something to do with the bad overdubbing. But this guy's American. He was nobody, like the article says, nobody knows a lot about this guy. But I think they found him in San Francisco, where he was pretty prominent member of the gay community in the 70s and 80s. And seems like he was doing gay porn and he was doing sex work. Seems to be a very popular guy amongst the community. There's interviews with people who knew him in this article who thought he was very worth the money that he cost. So,
wow, that's fascinating. But yeah. Having heard that, I'm not surprised. I mean, the dude was absolutely ripped. Like, even amongst in a caveman movie where everyone else is fairly ripped as well, he kind of stands out. And in fact, at one point in the film,
and amazing hair.
Amazing hair. He looked like something out of Stryker or any of the kind of hair metal bands of the 80s. But I think at one point in the film, Kim has very kindly let me talk about the lines, but the lines appear at various points in the film, and at one point it appears that he just scares one of them off by just showing them his abs. I mean, that's the lion kind of sees his glistening abs and runs away. That's how powerful he is.
who would win in a fight between unarmed Sam Pascoe and a lion, I guess, is the question.
Mm.
Anyway, just to finish up about him, so he died in 1985, and knowing what we know about him now, you'd assume it was AIDS, but it doesn't seem to have been, although nobody seems to be very sure how he died. Some people suggested it was liver failure from steroid use, which does seem plausible, but somebody else also suggested suicide. So it's not clear exactly why he died, but this was apparently the only movie he ever did, the only mainstream-ish movie he ever did.
That's sad. That's
It is.
yeah. It sounds like there's
Mm-hmm.
more to be learned there.
Yeah, someone should write a biography on him or something.
Certainly, some of the other cast members look like they could have been sourced from adult work as well. Certainly, the Lith, the bad woman, looks like she's possibly from that sphere.
They were all incredibly good looking, except for the dad with his terrible wig. I mean, his face was good looking, but the wig just was so distracting.
Well, I think that we're on the mark with all the other actors in this movie because the director is Umberto Lenzi, who is an Italian filmmaker that I'm not familiar with, but he seems to have been pretty prominent doing very much this style of movie. Going through his IMDb here, he's directed movies such as Cannibal Ferox.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Primal Rage. It seems like this was very much his style, these sort of erotic. This one, I was worried because there is a whole genre of these 1970s, 1980s caveman movies that are, some sort of erotic 80s style, softcore kind of thing, which I've added, I try not to add those to our list because I'm not sure that we want to do those. And this one was like, I don't know if this is did you guys see the movie poster that I saw for this one?
No. I mean, it's one of the most unerotic films I've ever seen, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, the movie poster totally, it makes me think it was going to be, I know this reading of this director, he's doing gore, B-movie gore and boobs, basically. So let me send you the movie poster in Discord, which is the one that I saw.
Her boobies are out in it.
Yes, you're looking at the one I saw. There's a few different versions of this.
And there's a
the one
pterodactyl in the back.
that looks like Conan the Barbarian with the pterodactyl in the background?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've got our protagonist who is, he looks exactly like he does. He's totally ripped. But he's got his woman companion beside him with her breasts completely exposed. Now, this is a painting. This isn't a photo.
Yeah. It's but actually, in the one on IMDb, she's got a very, very tiny bikini on.
Yeah, there's many different versions of this painting, so it's been edited in a lot of different ways.
You would think it would be a way sexier movie if you saw that poster. I think you'd be pretty disappointed at the lack of boobs or sex.
Yeah, when I think I must have found this on Letterboxd because this was the first poster I saw with the exposed breasts, and I was like, oh, I don't know if this is a caveman movie, but from the description it said it was, and then I found it on YouTube and I'm like, oh, this is totally 100% a caveman movie, which is almost completely devoid of sex. There is a sex scene, which is between who we now know as a gay man who can't act very well. So there's not that much to it.
Nope. And it has a classic cut, sort of slowly pan away to a roaring fire, which was oh god, yeah, just total cliche and hugely unconvincing.
Okay, so as we said, this movie doesn't care about reality. We have a Stone Age tribe who learns metalworking, and the first thing they make are iron swords. We can talk about ironworking a bit, I guess. We could also talk about the animals a bit more. We love to talk about the animals. So as we said, there's African lions in this. Real lions. All the animals are real animals.
Yeah, they could be Indian lions. We don't quite know. They've got quite a lot of mane, but they're definitely been hanging out in Europe or wherever that they've kind of grown extra big manes. And yeah, what can we say about the lions? The actual fight scenes with the lions seem to be pretty well done. The lions must have been well trained because you have them doing some pretty cool stunts where they're getting kind of stabbed by these iron swords, and then you have one lying down, acting even better than Alar, I think, in a kind of death scene where it's just kind of like panting away. I thought it was really good, and you have them kind of grappling with people. So there's lots of animals in it. At the start, you see lots of wild boars, which are themselves pretty dangerous, and they kind of get up close with people. You see them hanging around with kind of stampeding herds of buffalo or bison, since they're in Europe, I guess. We call them bison, which is also, quite dangerous. You see all the time, like tourists in Yellowstone getting gored or flips or otherwise horribly maimed because they're stupid enough to get close to them.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lovely bit right at the beginning where you have some incredibly fake mammoths that are kind of look like they're being moved around on little sticks as they kind of play trumpeting elephants. I thought that was lovely. What other animals do they have?
There are the Australopithecus, which I think they call Ursus.
Yeah, I just thought they were monkey men. I don't know. I mean, they're not Neanderthals.
Well, yeah, the movie doesn't care about what Australopithecus means. The movie isn't trying to make them something specific.
It clearly doesn't. But, I mean, the makeup on them is really good. They look pretty convincing as monkey men.
With fully modeled genitalia, which are always dangling around for some reason. I mean, I guess that makes sense. I guess every other movie that doesn't model the Australopithecus genitals is less accurate, so we can give it that.
Yeah, that's true.
The wild boar, they have a scene where they hunt it, and then they carry it home butchered, and they really killed and butchered a boar for that scene. So we can't say that no animals were harmed in the making of this movie.
It's very clearly a real dead wild boar.
Yeah.
They've gutted it and everything. Which I think, in 83, that should have raised some questions, I think. Maybe not in Italy and France, but definitely that's not something you could have had in a Hollywood film.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's the lines, as I said, they're really good. There's one point where Bood, the bad guy with the iron, he's fighting two lions. It kills one of them. The other one, we never really see what happens to it. But he turns it into a lovely hat, which he wears for the rest of the film.
For the rest of the movie.
So
now, this
funny.
hat is on par with the tiger from the Neanderthal Man.
Yeah.
You remember that tiger?
Yeah.
This is a terrible looking lion head hat.
Yeah.
It's like he just destroyed a toy and is wearing it.
But, if we're going to give them credit, if we're going to be generous to the filmmakers, I mean, it's essentially, he just pulled the skin off the skull. That would look pretty crappy without any sort of taxidermy. But yeah, it fits him beautifully, and he wears it proudly for the rest of the film.
And also the rest of the lion fur as well. He's got a bit of a lion cape, and then he's just got lion fur sort of strapped to his legs.
Yeah.
He looks very terrible.
Yeah.
He does.
But I guess it's fearsome if it demonstrates that he killed a lion.
But, I mean, also, it's weird, this film, right from the beginning. It looks like the opening scenes have some quite fantastic geology, which I'm assuming is somewhere in Italy. And it's clearly very, very windy, judging by how their hair is getting blown about all over the place, their copious hair. But they look really miserable because it's obviously very cold, and they're wearing budgie smuggling for Speedos, and that's about it. I mean, there's not a very consistent approach to clothing in this film. If they're cold, they should have more fur on, and as always, they should be wearing it with the fur on the inside because that's what's warm, not with the leather on against your skin and the fur on the outside. So yeah, that's not enough fur there. I guess they have to show off their goods, which they've got to show how jacked they are. So that's probably why. But then they also, when they're hunting the wild boar, they're kind of running through forests with like tons of thorns and kind of prickles and spikes. They're going to get ripped to bits. And this is a time when a scratch could get infected and kill you. These people would have had protective clothing if they were going to be running through the forest, because they would have known that you don't want to get cut when that can easily get infected and kill you. So yeah, as Josh said, they don't really care. That's fine. There's some cave art.
Oh, cave art, yeah.
Yeah.
There's some cave arts. The wise man, who's I think called Ra, who's very kind of gnomic and gives out lots of random wisdom. He paints not even a particularly kind of, it's sort of Lascaux Chauvet-ish in that it's kind of animals. So there's like mammoths and bison, kind of Altamira-ish style. But but this wise man who's got a lovely little stick with a skull on it, he interprets the sign that one of these mammoths on the cave wall starts bleeding from its eyes just after the old chief Boud's father is murdered by Boud. That the mammoth on the cave wall starts bleeding, and that's a sign that something bad has happened.
There's a lot of spirituality in this that is true, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not just belief, but that Lith was told to go, like she just found him randomly in a cave. There had been no reason for her to know
She
where
walks
he
up
was,
to
right?
him and she says,
Yeah.
Vood, and he's like, how do you know my name? And she's like, the god told me.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're written in the stars.
Yeah, all this was meant to happen.
And then, I mean, there's also when Ella kind of meets Alar, she just appears out of nowhere as well and knows how to fix his wounds and all sorts of stuff. She's a much better
Right.
actor than Lith,
Yes.
but that doesn't take much.
You talked about the geology, so let's pointlessly figure out where this movie is supposed to be set. So we've got, based on all the animals, that's one of the ways we usually try and pin down where the movie is supposed to take place.
Mm-hmm.
But the landscape to me, so the movie is a joint production between Italy and France, but that landscape that they spend a lot of time, at least all the out in the open outside scenes, immediately to me was like, oh, that's the American Great Plains.
Yeah.
And of course, it was actually filmed in Custer State Park in South Dakota.
Oh, really?
Which is where this herd of the herd of buffalo is. So
right.
They must have been like, oh, we got access to buffalo. We're going to film a whole bunch out here.
Mm.
And so, yeah, those geological landscapes, those heavily eroded sort of rolling hills, that's definitely South Dakota. Of course, there's no caveman movies that are going to be set in the Americas because there's no humans living in the Americas before probably 30,000 years ago, which I guess still would be Upper Paleolithic in Europe, so we could still call that a caveman movie. But anyway, the landscape looks like the Great Plains of the Americas to me, being here as I am on the Great Plains of the Americas. But the animals, the buffalo makes sense there. I guess the wild boar. Were there wild boars in the Americas before European contact?
No.
I don't think so.
So Americans have no pig family apart from peccaries, and javelinas, which are not the same as the wild boars that are in the film. They look a little bit like it because they're part of the suid family, but they're not the same. And there's never been any, as far as I know, any of the sus genus. So that's like sus scrofa, which is the wild boar, or the other old world sus, like bearded pigs and warty pigs and all these other kind of strange South Asian and African pig-like animals. They've only had the kind of peccary family in the Americas. So that alone sort of places it in the old world. And of course, the old world has bison as well, our largest surviving mammal. And we've got lions as well, though the Americas had lions too, not mountain lions or pumas, but actual lions, the same species group as you get in Africa and India today, which I've spent a lot of my professional time working on. Mammoths as well.
So it would make sense that those lions were there?
Yeah, whether it was in the Americas or in Europe, you'd have had lions. Definitely, if they're meant to be cave lions, then yeah, a European setting would be fine. Mammoths also you have in Europe and North America. So it's really only the wild boars that places it in Europe, Eurasia. And I guess the volcanism as well would suggest that they were trying to make it, I don't know, Italy somewhere.
I guess that's just the influence of the filmmakers at that point. Now, one of the things that doesn't fit with any of this is the Australopithecus or whatever they are. They don't say Australopithecus, so all we can interpret is a short, furry, bipedal ape. Yep. Which, most of those are from Africa. But we're learning a lot about non-human hominins, or different lineages of hominins that we haven't known about for a long time. So we've got in Southeast Asia, we've got Homo floresiensis, Homo luzonensis. We talked about these with Matt Tosheri. And so it's possible that there was a migration of these earlier Australopithecus or Homo habilis through Asia that spawned these groups, and we have no record of them in Asia. So it's possible that there were some hominins like this in that region. We also have some evidence now that I'm not really too familiar with that Grecopithecus or something similar to that might have been bipedal, and so this is obviously from Greek. So there may have been a really early bipedal, some sort of ape, either convergent or, basal or very distant sister lineage to the lineage that would become humans that was bipedal living in Europe at the time. So again, that's all possible. So even though the movie doesn't care, it does seem like we can plausibly find a geographical location where this makes sense.
That would be amazing to find a bipedal hominin in North America.
Bigfoot.
Deloy's ape. That would be the other one.
Mm.
But yeah, we could do some nitpicking as well. Well, the film doesn't care, but there's lots of kind of weird things that just appear, like them inventing bows and arrows, like them inventing bellows to know how to work the metal and melt it down to make more swords. Having kind of rotary kernstones in the Peace Village that Ayla's from.
Yep.
The peaceful village is fully agricultural.
Yeah.
And this other village nearby just went directly from the Stone Age to the Iron Age with no other technology in between.
Yeah. With the volcano and the magma, like that wouldn't make an iron rod like that, right?
Not as far as I can figure.
Well, okay, what do we know about iron? Because I went on a deep dive about iron last night.
What do we know? Not very much. Atomic symbol Fe. It's a metal. It's fairly abundant. Lots of mineral ores, hematite.
That's why their god was named Epheron.
Clever. But it's not going to be found. The only kind of elemental sources of iron are going to be meteorites, which people have used in the past. Every kind of source of iron, as far as I know, that's kind of terrestrial and natural, is as a mineral. And the problem with that is that it takes an awful lot of heat to separate it out from the ores that it's found in, and that's why Iron Age is the last age after millions of years of Stone Age and a few thousand years of Copper and Bronze Age, which have ores which will separate the metal at much lower temperatures. For iron work, you have to have like pretty advanced smelting technology. You have to have, unless you're hammering with elemental iron, which has come from meteorites, which we know Native Americans did that. We know North Eurasian groups did that, where they were easy to find meteorites in the snow. We know that the Egyptians did that as well. Like Tutankhamun's got an iron dagger that's made from meteorite iron, and it's a very pure source which can be worked by hammering and shaping. But to get like cast iron to kind of do iron working, you have to have really high temperatures, which have to use, I think, either coal or charcoal to achieve the right kind of temperatures. You have to have bellows, which itself are a technology that has to be made. You have to have, the right ores to use as well. So that's why it took humans so long to kind of figure out the whole process.
So archaeologically, did you mention King Tut's dagger in that?
Yeah.
So yeah, King Tut very famously had a dagger, an iron dagger made from meteorite iron. And like you said, this was very uncommon at the time, so it was reserved for like ritual stuff or, for a king, right? And it was cold worked. It was just hammered because it was already metallic iron from a meteorite that they could hammer into a shape. It wasn't smelted. I think that iron smelting had already existed at the time in some parts of the world in like Sumeria. I think that the first beginnings of iron smelting and like processing iron ore had already started at that time, but it wasn't a commonplace or a practical or efficient thing to do, so it didn't spread around the world very much. But there are other sources of iron. So as you said, the Inuit in Greenland were using iron, and most of this was coming from, again, a meteorite, the Cape York meteorite, which it exists in several pieces. It was a very large meteorite. I think the largest piece is like 30 tons or something like that. And so it has metallic iron in it, and they can, hammer chunks of iron off with rocks and then work it into the shape of blades. And so the thing about meteoric iron, and the way we can tell it's different from terrestrial iron, is that it has higher nickel content. So iron on Earth tends to have less than 3% nickel, and iron from meteorites tend to have higher than 5% nickel. So this is how we know that the sources of these irons came from meteorites. But there are terrestrial sources of metallic iron that are just extremely rare. And the only one that I think is still exists is also from Greenland, from Disco Bay. It's called telluric iron or native iron. This is iron that exists naturally in a metallic form, and it does come from volcanoes, interestingly enough.
Oh, right.
So it tends to be little chunks embedded in basalt. So if you have, is kind of like I watched the movie and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. But then I'm like looking it up and I'm like, oh, so if you have like a lava flow which cools into basalt and it has these iron impurities, they can sort of crystallize into small chunks of iron. Now, of course, it's not an entire sword length blade of iron. They're small little chunks, but they're solid metallic iron that ends up embedded in this basalt. And the Inuit in Greenland were also using these sources of iron as well. So they would break out these tiny chunks of iron and then pound them flat into little discs, which they would use to make blades. The typical Inuit blade is called an ulu, which is kind of a half moon-shaped blade, which was good for cutting meat or processing skins, right? So the Greenland Inuit were using iron both from meteorites and from native terrestrial sources. Long before contact with Europeans, and also trading it as well. So we know the Vikings had some iron from some of these sources that they were using for arrowheads. And also we can see this trade deeper into North America. So we have evidence of trade networks based on the sources of the iron that these people were using, which I found very interesting.
That is so cool. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I've just done a quick Google search, but one of the chunks of the Greenland meteor that the Greenlanders used as an iron source, I've actually seen, because the Danish Naturist Museum has it outside their front doors. It's called the Agpalalik meteorite. It's just 20 kilos, so it's pretty enormous, and it's just sitting there in the courtyard. I went past it every day when I worked in the Danish Museum.
I don't know if I told this story before, because I feel like we've talked about meteorites, but a long time ago, I was doing a bike trip across the prairies with a friend, like several days on our bikes. And we were going through these tiny little farm towns where there's no stores and nothing's open. We did like 100 kilometers without finding a restaurant. So we pulled into this town, Westburn, Manitoba, I think. Nothing was open but a farm supply store, and we go in there and we start talking to the guy, and he invites us in for coffee and cake because they were on their coffee break.
This is so Canadian.
Yeah. He was telling us that he collects meteorites, this weird little farm supply store owner. This was in like 2008, so this is kind of earlier internet. And so he was telling us this story about how he was in an online community of meteorite collectors, and they were in contact by the internet with some guy in Siberia who scours the landscape for meteorites and sells them. And he found this meteorite, and this group of collectors pooled their money together to buy this meteorite and have it cut up into chunks about 2 inches square. And so they pooled their money. They sent it to this guy in Russia over the internet in 2008. they paid for him to send it to some place, I think in Arizona, to process it, to cut it up into cubes and polish it, and then distribute it out to all of them. And it worked. He just sent his money to some guy in Russia and he got his piece of meteorite. I don't remember the name of the meteorite, but there's like several different types. And this is the rarest one that has like solid nickel embedded in like sort of transparent green and orange minerals.
Wow.
And he told us about it and he said it sounded really cool. And then so we left, we took off down the road on our bikes in the pouring rain. A few miles down the road, this pickup truck comes up behind us honking. And we pull over in the rain, and he went home to get his meteorite to show it to us on the side of the highway out on the prairie.
So cute.
And it was so cool. It was this perfect little polished cube, and it looks so unearthly because it's so weird to have, like, basically it looked like metal embedded in green and orange glass, which just... You can't imagine how you would make that on Earth, you know? It just clearly looked like it was from somewhere else. But that was so cool. That's one of my favorite stories.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
I've never mentioned
cool.
that before. That's great.
No.
I was expecting, when we started the story, I was expecting, a kind of a 419 kind of story where, they sent all their money to this guy in Russia and then never heard from him again.
Yeah. That's what I was expecting when he told us he sent his money to a guy in Russia over the internet. I'm like, oh, so you lost your money?
Oh, dear.
We could also talk about the invention of the bow and arrow, which happens very flippantly in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to figure out how they can defeat Vood and his army of iron swords. And I don't think we mentioned this kid who escaped from the first village they massacred and then teams up with them. And he takes Ayla over to this tree and he's like, this is the tree I was telling you about. And Ayla pulls the branch and it springs up like a catapult. It has a very good spring to it. And he's like, oh, ho, 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 you stupid kid. We can't defeat them with sticks. But then like 5 minutes later, there's a pile of sticks on the ground and he picks one up and he looks at it and he strips the bark off and he like springs it and it bounces and he springs it again and he does this several more times. And he's like, and then he throws it to a guy. And then the next scene, they have bows and arrows.
Yeah.
And so he just like stole the idea from the kid.
He didn't get any credit.
No. But you also don't know, like they go from finding sword in the ground to smelting perfectly like shaped things that they want very quickly with no practice
bellows and molds and also clearly metal ironworking tools. How did they get metal ironworking tools?
They've got tongs and a crucible that you can hold molten iron. How did you make that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nuts.
But if ironworking goes back 5,000 years, the bow and arrow goes back like up to possibly 70,000 years in South Africa. So the timeline is all messed up on that.
Yeah. And am I right in thinking that bows and arrows are a kind of technology that's been independently invented a few different times? Because it seems to be like, my understanding was that it was really late, like Neolithic in Europe, that bows and arrows are around, whereas other places it's much earlier.
Yeah.
Which is interesting as well, I guess.
A PhD student in our department is trying to figure out when it started in the Philippines.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
One of the problems is that both bows and arrows are biodegradable, so you're interpreting this from stone arrowheads, right? Mm-hmm. In the movie here, they don't use arrowheads. They just have sharpened and fire-hardened sticks. So, I mean, if bows and arrows started, but they just had sharpened sticks for arrows instead of stone arrowheads, then there wouldn't be any evidence of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely, from arrowheads, it's definitely been invented a few times. So there's evidence in Sibudu Cave in South Africa of possible arrowheads about 70,000 years old, which is crazy old. Mm-hmm. And then we have some evidence in Southeast Asia from about 50,000 years ago. There's some possible early evidence in Europe, maybe as early as 30,000 years ago. But then this technology seems to be sort of sporadic throughout time. And then after basically Neolithic is when it spreads all throughout the old world. But then it would have been independently invented in the Americas as well, because there wasn't contact at that time.
Yeah.
And so, around 10,000 years ago in the Americas, or 13,000 for sure, we have atlatl spear throwing technology.
Mhm.
We have like the famous Clovis spear points. So they were using spears at the time when the bow and arrow was spreading through the old world. But then the bow and arrow is invented a few thousand years later in North America. I'm not sure exactly what date the oldest arrows are in North America.
I mean, you'd have to hope that, like with the Clapton spear or the Schoningen spears, like these really rare sites that have organic preservation, that we might be lucky enough to find some preserved early arrows or bows that would give us a timing. And we've talked a little bit in this film about where we think it might have taken place, but have we any idea about what time they're kind of pretending to be talking about?
Well, I mean, there's modern humans with a Australopith or something like that species. So it's not a real time.
No, it's just the past.
Yeah, with ironworking, with agriculture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I thought was quite weird, we haven't touched upon, is there's a scene in the cave when Alar and Ella and some of the other kind of survivors from the various village massacres hide in a cave. The scene I'm talking about, and they sit there just for like 5 minutes before some really messed up people, I think, kind of come out of nowhere and scare them off. And they've clearly got some kind of horrific skin disease, and I figured that this was them. This is like a kind of leper colony or some kind of banished kind of group of people suffering from leprosy or Hansen's disease, as it's not known now. And that's why they're kind of messed up and why they're scared of them and don't want them to touch them while they're in the cave. But yeah, it seemed very Italian, kind of giallo kind of film, just a bit of weird kind of non sequitur creepiness that doesn't add anything to the film. It's just there to kind of pad it out.
It was such a weird scene. Like, it came out of nowhere and it didn't add anything. It was just there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't think that's really what leprosy looks like at all. Certainly, people with leprosy wouldn't randomly attack people for no reason.
Could have been syphilis.
Could it, though?
Right.
I mean, did they want to get close to them for sexy reasons? I don't know.
Well, you get syphilis. That would be tertiary syphilis. So that would be like you probably got it from your mom, right? And had it your whole life. And it does make you go mad.
Yeah, my wife knows a lot about syphilis through her work, I guess. But I mean, my understanding is that it's endemic mostly to the Americas, and that it wasn't really known in the old world before like 15th, 16th century, although there is some kind of controversy about that. Do you guys know anything about the spread of syphilis?
Yeah, it's pretty debated still. I think the oldest evidence is in a bison in North America, and there is some evidence in North America predating the European outbreak, but then people argue against it, argue against whether it is syphilis, so it's still debated.
One of the things I understand about that is that syphilis and leprosy in the skeleton manifest very similarly. And I know that some of my colleagues in Serbia were looking at this because traditionally it's believed that syphilis originated in the Americas and then spread into Europe after contact. And so related to that, every time you find a skeleton in Europe that's older than contact, if it has a disease that looks like leprosy or syphilis, well, it's leprosy because syphilis wasn't here at the time, right? But that's circular reasoning because we've decided that it wasn't present in Europe and therefore we're ruling it out on that basis. And so I know there have been people in Serbia looking at some medieval skeletons from like the 1300s with pathologies and trying to reassess if in fact it is syphilis instead of leprosy.
What we need, so there are big differences between leprosy, like the skeletal manifestations of leprosy and syphilis. It's just that they can be difficult to identify if there's not very much preservation of the skeleton or if they're both pretty mild cases, right? But there is a lesion that's pathognomonic of syphilis, which means that like if you have it, that indicates it's for sure a syphilis. So really what we need is to find the oldest case that has that, where you can't argue with it. That's what it has. Leprosy doesn't have that. Tuberculosis doesn't have that. Like nothing else. This is syphilis.
And what is that symptom, Kim?
It's called caries sicca, and it's the holes in the cranium that kind of, the bone resorbs and makes like a dent and a hole in the cranium, and then the bone heals again, so it makes like ends up looking like cottage cheese skull, but it's hard, but it's like bumpy and holy, and it's just looks really weird.
Yeah, sounds gross.
Yeah. So if you just have like the postcranial manifestations of syphilis, then it could be a lot of different things, right? But if you have that, then you know for sure it's syphilis.
And I guess there isn't really any reason why there couldn't be sort of pre-Columbian syphilis in the old world, because it is a zoonotic disease as well. Like some animals get syphilis that could have spread it at any point, really. I think some types of seal or sea lion get syphilis, perhaps. So that could be another route.
Yeah, and there's also it's a treponemal disease, and then there's other treponemal diseases too, like Yalls and Beigel and Pinto that are very common in tropical countries, including Southeast Asia. So here in the archaeological record, we see yaws quite often, right? But I don't think they've identified syphilis yet, at least not that I've read. So evolutionarily, in terms of the speciation of the mycobacterium, it could possibly be from tropical region in Asia, but we just don't have the evidence for that.
Does treponemal mean it makes holes in the skull?
I think treponemes are a type of
yeah, it's a type of the shape of it, I think. Yeah.
So the similar sound to trepanation is a coincidence?
I think so. If anything, I would think that trepanation was maybe named after the syphilis, but
oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to look at to see what that connection is.
Trepanation, for the listeners, is drilling holes in the skull to release pressure, which was a common medical procedure in the ancient past.
And still is practiced today.
I'm frantically googling the etymology of treponeme, and it apparently comes from the Greek trepane, to turn, and nema, thread. I think that's a description of the appearance of this this disease, like organism, which is like a little kind of tiny little corkscrew-shaped cell. Whereas, let's have a look what trepanation etymological.
Well, I think it's the same.
It's probably the same kind of.
It's screwing into the hole.
Yeah, probably like a screw, because that's what they're actually doing. They're putting a screw into your head.
Yeah, or scraping. But yeah, so I would say that they have the same. They're not they're not named after each other, but they have the same root. Yeah.
There we go.
Neat. That's all my notes.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I appreciated that the guy had a skull on the stick, but it wasn't like a scary thing. He wasn't a bad guy. Like it wasn't like an evil thing. It was just a human skull on a stick because it looked cool. I like that. Human skulls aren't scary.
And it was a human skull, not a other hominin.
No, the face looked human. It looked like it could have a bit of an occipital bun, but I think it was just because it was a fake skull.
There's a nice training montage when these guys have what is, I guess, the first sword fight ever in history, where he kind of teaches the peaceful village how to fight with swords that they've stolen from Vood and his bad guys. And I think you missed out, Kim, because some of this sort of sword clashing sound effects are actually quite cool in the kind of last bit of the film that you missed out of. There's lots of kind of clanking and bashing with the swords.
Well, I don't know what happened
sounded like
because
they were clanking hollow pipes.
Yeah, because I checked to see if it was my iPlayer or like my iPad, but it wasn't. Other things had noise, so I assumed it was the video. But I just watched the video that you sent, Josh. So the link.
Same here. So props to the Foley artist for that. Some of my other notes are what you pointed out as well, Kim, is that their aim was terrible. But I think this is a thing that's in all the kind of cave person movies that we watched. They've all got the aim of stormtroopers. Like nobody is hitting anything, pretty much.
See, but I took that as they were just warning them that it could kill them because it was so close each time, and they had done so long. I think
that's just because you're a generous Canadian that likes to see the best in people. As a cynical Scotsman, I thought that it was just that they couldn't afford the insurance for getting too close to the actors. But there's a lot of that, and there are some. There's people getting arrowed to the neck, arrows to the knee. There's lots of kind of styrofoam boulders that people are throwing around, and even earlier on, there's a Boods tribe, I think, gets attacked by another tribe who are flinging bolas at them. So they're like swinging around these bolas and throwing them, and none of them are going within about 20 feet of the people they're meant to be aiming for, which was ridiculous because these people would have had, they'd have had as much practice with the weapons they'd have used as they had for, walking and talking. If they wanted to hit something, they'd be hitting it. And, these kind of projectile weapons, things like bolas or slingshots, these things were absolutely lethal. Like, getting hit by a slingshot was like being hit by a sniper. It would kill you because these guys would be able to aim for the spot on your forehead that would penetrate your skull. That's how good they were. So it's just a general kind of annoyance that all these cave people are always depicted as being really rubbish at what would have been their kind of expert level job, like using these weapons.
Yeah, because if they're not expert at it, they don't eat, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
At some point early on, they were complaining that all of the succulent squirrels and the tasty rabbits were gone, and they had to find somewhere else to hunt. And they're like, "There's only buffalo left, and how can we take down a buffalo with sticks and stones?" But people hunted large game like that pretty commonly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I wanted to talk more about the archery. I almost forgot because I don't actively do archery, but I've always been kind of interested in archery. And they definitely didn't have an archery consultant on this movie. So first of all, they're lucky they hit anybody at all because there's no fletchings on the arrows. And an arrow's not going to fly true if it doesn't have fletchings. They keep it flying straight, right? Very important on an arrow. The other thing is their form holding their bows makes no sense. They're holding the arrow over top their thumb. So they're holding right-handed, so they're holding the bow with their left hand and drawing with their right hand. And then they have the arrow on the outside over their thumb, which is the wrong side. The arrow sits on the left side over your knuckle. And so modern bows typically are going to have a shelf or a guide there for the arrow to sit. And if they don't, it sits directly on your finger there. And it sits on the knuckle. If you sit it on your thumb, it's going to fall off the bow when you shoot it. So they're lucky they hit anything. They're also using the pinch draw technique, where they're pinching the arrow itself with their thumb and forefinger. And this is a technique that you can use, but nobody uses it because you can't draw basically more than 10 pounds with it. And any bow that's going to kill somebody is going to have a much heavier draw weight than that. The most common technique is, I can't remember what it's called, but your fingers grab on the string itself and you pull the string with your fingers. There's a few different ways to do it, either with 2 or 3 fingers. And then when you let go, you sort of release your fingers and the string rolls off your fingers. So this lets the string go straight without, disturbing the direction of the force. But you pull on the string with your fingers because you can pull the heavy weight of a bow with that. If you're just pinching the arrow, it's going to slip out of your hand and you're not going to get enough weight on the shot. Not to mention that these bows were made out of green branches that weren't worked in anyway, and the string looked like it was made of some fiber that was going to fray pretty quickly. So sorry, I had to comment on that.
They had just invented that technology like the hour before that, so I guess they didn't really
give them a break, Josh.
I spent a lot of my childhood making bows and arrows out of green wood with baler twine out in the bush.
Fun.
And we would shoot directly at each other because it wouldn't hurt when you're...
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that they would have killed anybody with that technique.
We should maybe bring up the listener mail we got, if that's the end of this.
We had our last episode, Kim, you mentioned a story about an Egyptian mummy at U of A, which of course is, I don't think we mentioned in the episode, but the University of Alaska.
Alberta.
University of Alberta, right?
Canada.
We have a very globally distributed listener base here. U of A could be literally anything.
That's true. But it's where I did my undergrad.
Anyway, yeah, a listener named Duncan sent us a story about when he was an undergrad at U of A, and they had to do some project, and one of his classmates discovered this, or they knew about the story of this mummy. So for a project, one of his classmates figured out where the mummy was and got permission to CT scan, and it was scanned in the 1996, I think, which must have been when he was a student there. So there's a few things I found online talking about the scan that was done in 1996. So I'll post those in the listener notes for this episode if anyone wants to learn more about the Egyptian mummy at the University of Alberta.
I do. I didn't even believe it was real. I thought it was just a rumor, because then he said in his email, he said that they did all this and they put it on display in the Physanth lab. But I went to U of A, started at U of A 2002, so I probably had my first physical anthropology class 2003, and it was already back into being lore by that point. So it was very quickly
I wonder where it is now.
Biology department, apparently.
I think that it was scanned again in 2016, according to one of these things I found. So it still exists somewhere. I don't know where it is. I haven't been to U of A. U of A is in Calgary?
Edmonton.
Edmonton. No, I haven't been to U of A then, so I wouldn't know anything about it. Well, thanks, Duncan, for that story. If anybody else has any interesting stories related to anything that we've talked about, send us an email and we'll maybe talk about it on our show.
Or if you just want to say hi.
Yeah, just say hi.
We like getting listener mail.
What do we think about Ironmaster? We've been talking about it a lot, but I don't know where we actually stand on this movie. Is it awful? Is it really good and fun?
It's pretty awful.
It's awful, but I'll forget that we watched it. Like, it didn't make me angry, but it didn't really entertain me.
It's hugely generic. I mean, it's just the thing that you always see. Like, somebody gets banished from a tribe, and then they have to fight their way back, and then there's conflict and cave ladies and fighting, and that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's possibly a little bit more depth to this, in that I think it's supposed to be some kind of pacifism allegory. The whole thing at the end, where they kind of get rid of all their iron weapons and throw them into the lake. That I think that's meant to be, maybe some kind of allegory for getting rid of nuclear weapons or something. I don't know. But yeah, maybe also worth mentioning that we have lots of Iron Age swords that have been deposited deliberately and kind of bent out of shape and kind of mangled and dropped into lakes as kind of, well, we don't really know, but kind of votive offerings or some kind of appeasement of the deity kind of thing. So that there are lots of Iron Age and Bronze Age weapons at the bottom of, and even kind of Neolithic and Paleolithic weapons that have been deposited ritually in lakes and other kind of inaccessible places, which is quite interesting. But yeah, terrible movie, instantly forgettable. We've seen it like 100 times in other ways, but there's not many cave films that star adult entertainers with glistening pecs and abs. So if that's your bag, then this is the film for you.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I'm never going to forget Big Max's plastic face and his red pecs. If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestonage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.